with Don Kapper here, an expert in equine nutrition, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the horse's diet today. The first question I wanted to pose to you, Don, was what are the most expensive parts of a horse's diet?
If we're looking at the nutrient levels, the two most expensive is protein and phosphorus. And so we need to make sure that we're not overfeeding them, but make sure we're not underfeeding them too. And of course, the least expensive way of doing that is to make sure it's in your forage. Forage will be 1.5 to 2% of their body weight in amounts consumed per day. And so it is the easiest and the least expensive way of doing it. However, if it's not in your forage, then you have to add it. And the critical part, I think, in our beginning here is understanding this forage eating animal. The only thing that we need to add to the diet, other than forage, is the nutrients, the different nutrients from what your horse needs and what is in your forage. So once we know what's in the forage and what your horse needs, then we know exactly what we need to feed per day for the least amount of money.
So, how can we save on some of those most expensive parts of the diet?
The easiest way is to know what's in your forage. So have your hay analyzed. They now have what they call an NIR, where you can get protein and energy and major minerals for less than $20, which makes it very, very convenient and easy to then talk to your veterinarian or talk to a nutritionist about what really needs to be added to that forage to meet your horse's needs and maintain body weight.
Fantastic. So, right now, many horses are not working like they normally would. So, what do we need to think about as far as changes to their diet?
Right. Very good question, especially right now. The number one is body weight, the visual that you can see. And then on hands-on, you can palpate how thick the fat is getting in certain areas on the horse's body, and we call that a body condition score. And so with less work, they need less calories. And many times our hay contains enough calories they don't need anymore. All they need then is the amino acids and mineral levels to meet their needs. So the easiest way, and most people are feeding a grass hay or a grass mixed hay today, is go from feeding a horse feed to a ration balancer. And what ration balancers are, it's a combination of protein, minerals, and vitamins without any added calories. So we want the fat level to be low. We want the starch level to be low, so we can meet their needs without getting them heavier or affecting them between the ears when you want to work with them, getting too many calories and they're acting up. So that is the best way. And I have a list here, and I'll make sure that you have one too. I'll hold that up. This tells us, it's a feed calculator. So on the top, it says how many pounds you're supposed to feed per day of the feed that you've selected. And on the left, it has in dollars per 50-pound bag. And so we'll find out how many pounds we're going to feed and come down to the cost of the bag, and that gives you your cost per day. And so with this chart, you can tabulate out what is the least expensive way for you on your horse and the size of your horse to feed per day.
So a lot of people have a pretty full cabinet when it comes to supplements. I think you've already alluded to the ration balancer as being the most important one if you're feeding grass hay. But what do you say to people who have a lot of supplements, and which ones do they really need aside from the ones that the vet has prescribed for that particular horse?
Sure. Great question. I'll go back to the comment. The only thing we need to add between what's in your forage is what your horse needs. And so many people don't know, and so then they start adding supplements. And if one didn't work, then they'll add another supplement, but they'll never take it away. So out of my 30 plus years of problem solving on horse farms, the majority of the time of the farms that I've been called out on, they were feeding an average of 6 additional supplements a day. And they were totally unbalancing the diet. They were trying so hard that they were doing harm. So reevaluate whatever you're feeding. And it should be in your balancer. If you're feeding the correct amount per day, you shouldn't need to add anything else. But in some areas and some genetics, they want to add some vitamin E, and that's an expensive ingredient. It can be beneficial if your horse is in need of it. So have your veterinarian do a serum vitamin E level and find out if you need it. The mineral levels, looking at it that way, serum mineral levels, if it comes back deficient, your horse is deficient. But if it comes back adequate, it doesn't mean it could be adequate, because the horse has a homeostatic mechanism that it can draw these minerals from their stored body reserves to keep the serum levels adequate. And so they may be depleting their system or mining their system, if you wish, and we not know it until the reserves are gone, and then gross deficiencies become apparent. And that's when we really get into trouble. So there are some things we can test for serum-wise. And I always recommend doing it, because if it comes back deficient, we know where it's deficient, but cautiously optimistic if it comes back within normal range.
That's very good advice to know. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when somebody's pasture isn't ready, or they're having a stopgap getting hay right now. Well, what kind of things can they do?
Great question. Okay, there's many different sources of fiber on the market. Some of these fibers are fermentable, which means the horse can break them down and get nutrients out of them. And some of them aren't fermentable, which means they're fillers, and they will come through tomorrow the same form that they went in today, that they ate them in. So they're not digestible. The 3 most available is in a pellet form or a cube form would be alfalfa. That's commonly, we could find that. The soybean hulls are very fermentable, and beet pulp. And so those are the 3 best sources of fiber that you could add if you need to add fiber to the diet, because your pasture isn't in yet and your hay is running low. The least fermentable sources of fiber is rice hulls, which we're starting to see more and more in horse feeds because they are cheap. They can add them and lower the cost per bag and lower the starch, but it doesn't improve fermentability. And so rice hulls, oat hulls, also known as oat mill feed, are the 2, and peanut hulls. You won't see many of those in Canada. I see them in the southern U.S. where peanuts are grown. But those are the three that are the lowest in digestibility or fermentability. And caution when you see those three names appear, or any of those three names appear on your tag. They are made as forage extenders, and they're good. They're coming up with sources of fiber to try to duplicate forage that the horse can utilize. And that would be the short-term best way to do it. More expensive, but if the hay is not available and your pastures aren't in yet, you have no choice to keep the horse healthy and keep that digestive tract functioning.
And what about feeding for broodmares right now? Either they still haven't foaled or with new foals on the ground.
Okay. Feeding broodmares is very expensive to meet their needs. And so I would say try to get up to at least 50% of their diet as alfalfa, because then you won't have to add so much protein. And protein and phosphorus are the two most expensive ingredients today. So if you can get alfalfa, go up to 50% of the diet, or that would be 1% of their body weight per day. Because I know we're talking to different horsemen that have different size horses, so it's better to do that way. So if a 1,000-pound horse, that would be 10 pounds of alfalfa a day and 10 pounds of grass hay. That would, but the mineral levels, you're going to have to feed them there, or the mare will draw them from their body reserves to take care of the baby. That's number one job. And when their reserves are gone, then their milk supply will be depleted, and then the baby will start showing problems. And so you cannot short the mare. You have to feed her for what she needs. And when you're looking at cost per head per day, it will be equal to the horse in the highest level of intense work. Those are the two most expensive feeding programs to put together, and the broodmare is right up there. If you miss the mark, she will pull those nutrients from her body reserves. If it's calories, she'll lose body weight. If it's protein, she'll lose muscle mass, and you'll start to see the withers more pronounced and the backbone more pronounced, because the muscle is atrophying to a point where it's weakening her. But then the baby's going to be affected. And those things will last that baby their entire life, because now is when cartilage is being formed. The transformation of cartilage to mature trabecular bone is being formed, and it won't change as they get older. So you may not see it until you put stress on the horse as a 3 or 4-year-old in training, and he doesn't hold up. And you'll say, I wonder what the trainer did. Well, most of the time, it's from in utero or within those first 6 months of life that these problems occurred. It wasn't until the horse was stressed did it cause the horse to break down. Interesting.
Yes. Thanks, Don, for sharing your wisdom with us on how we can meet our horses' energetic requirements in these difficult times. Any final thoughts before we conclude?
I think the big thing here is trying to remember the horse is a forage-eating animal. And so we're going to fill them up with as much forage as we can every day. Unless you have an obese animal, then that's a little bit different. But we're not talking those right now. But in general, we want to do as much as we can with forage, and then add only what we need to make up the difference between what's in your forage and what your horse needs. And that is called economics, and trying to feed the horse realistically on a cost per head per day basis.